In this video, I'm going to be learning about the Scottish New Year. So this is crazy to me.
His knife, see your russet Labour Day.
Okay.
Engine you're gushing on till's breast like on a ditch.
So in the video I did on British Christmas traditions, I had a lot of you guys from the UK and Scotland in particular tell me that Scotland didn't really celebrate Christmas so much as they celebrated New Year's. And you guys called that New Year's Hogmanay and also mentioned something called Burns Night. Both of these things are things that I have never heard about. But as always, I'm super grateful that you guys introduced me to these traditions in the comments. Before going into this video, I did read up a little bit on Hogmanay and Burns Night so that I knew what the heck they were. It looks like Hogmanay was kind of started by the Norse, and emphasis was placed on it over Christmas because of the Protestant Reformation, basically. The Scots felt that Christmas was a little bit too Catholic for them, and so they kind of put the emphasis on New Year celebrations instead. Now I know that that's probably an overly simplistic way of looking at it, but it's the gist of it. So I read up on Hogmanay. I found out that you guys have a tradition of like swinging fireballs around your heads. You guys have a traditional dinner where you eat haggis along with a few other things that I couldn't figure out what they were. Now I have heard of haggis before, but I had to look it up and see what it was, and not sure I could be convinced to eat it, but you know, to each his own. But then you guys also have something called Burns Night that kind of goes along with the dinner, where the haggis is bagpiped into the room basically, and then you guys read a poem as an ode to Robert Burns. Now I do remember Robert Burns coming up in some of my literature classes, so the name was super familiar to me, but I did not know that he wrote Auld Lang Syne. And I found out he was kind of like your national bard, and Burns Night kind of began when some of his friends came together and celebrated his life a few years after his death, and so now that's like a thing all over Scotland. It's really interesting to me because here in the United States we don't have like national bards, and I don't think we would ever make a holiday out of paying tribute to one of them. But don't get me wrong, I'm not making fun of it at all. It's just extremely different, and I think it's actually a really interesting tradition. So I looked online and really had a hard time finding a video that kind of explained everything. So what I might have to do here is do 2 or 3 different videos. Now the first video we're gonna watch is actually an American explaining the Scottish New Year, because there were no Scottish people who made a video explaining your New Year. But this guy looks like he probably is a Scottish American, and he's deeply entrenched in these traditions, so I hope that he gets all of this correct. If he doesn't, you guys can let me know down in the comments. But the other videos we're going to watch are actually going to be Scots in Scotland, so hopefully that will help make up for it a little bit.
Hey everybody, Eric here from USA Kilt and Culture, and we are going to talk about Hogmanay. Hogmanay, what is it? It is basically the Scots word for end of year, and it is the world's largest New Year's Eve celebration. In fact, back in 1996-97, the city of Edinburgh was noted by the Guinness Book of Records as having 400,000 participants. And shortly after that, they had to actually limit the number of people allowed into Center City because it was getting to be too huge.
I just have a very quick question about this, because I did read that in New York, in Times Square, when they drop the ball for New Year's Eve, that there's like 1 million people there, which outnumbers this. So I'm not really sure why they're saying that this is the largest New Year celebration in the world. Maybe there's something here that I'm not taking into account.
So that street party is really famous, but there's a lot more to this holiday than you might know. So we're going to run down some of our favorite Hogmanay traditions for you. So a little background first. Hogmanay, in one sense or another, has been celebrated since ancient times. It inherits both Celtic fire festival traditions and traditions of the Viking winter solstice festival known as Yule. Yule was brought to the British Isles by the Vikings and before them the Anglo-Saxons, and it was basically a 12-night-long winter holiday. That's where our term, the Yuletide or the 12 Days of Christmas, comes from. In Scotland, they tend to call it the Daft Days, and like that name implies, this was basically a huge round of partying and feasting. When the Christian church took root, the party went on. They just made a few changes, like celebrating Christ's birth and the arrival of the 3 wise men. Sadly for Scotland, the party got squelched in the 17th century after a bunch of nasty fighting known as the Wars of the 3 Kingdoms. The Presbyterian Church of Scotland rose to power, and they had no use for Christmas or really anything fun like drinking, eating too much, or, getting rowdy. So Christmas celebrations were outlawed.
We Meisterburgers shall hunt them down throughout the land.
In fact, you could even be arrested if you were caught baking Christmas pies.
This is interesting to me because Protestantism is a huge thing here in the United States. It's much larger than the Catholic churches. At least I think that's true. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But it's huge here in the United States, and yet we all celebrate Christmas with it. So it's very interesting to me that the Protestants over in Scotland view Christmas very differently than we do here in the US. I'm not really sure why that is.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks, John Knox. Appreciate that. So, Christmas as a holiday was not celebrated or recognized in Scotland until 1958. But that's where Hogmanay came in. Hogmanay was a great way to sidestep those rules and still have a really good blowout. Redding the house. Redding the house is similar to annual spring cleaning or the ritual cleaning of the kitchen before Passover.
I read about this.
Traditionally, during the Yuletide, no work was to be done at all, so you needed to be ready to drop all your housework before the celebrations began. Sweeping out the fireplace was especially symbolic and important, and there was a secret skill in reading the ashes to tell the future. Kind of like reading tea leaves. To this day, Scottish families will do a major cleanup to get ready for the New Year's.
Makes
Setting
sense,
things
though.
on
Makes
fire.
sense.
All around the world, people feel drawn to the warmth and light of fire during the darkest time of the year. It reminds us that the sun will in fact return. It drives off the blues, not to mention the odd evil spirit or two. Hogmanay celebrations are rooted in ancient Celtic fire rituals, more commonly associated with spring and autumn, and a lot of creativity goes into Hogmanay fire fun. Each region of Scotland has its own twist on it. In Edinburgh, the opening event of Hogmanay is a spectacular torchlight procession down the Royal Mile to Holyrood Park. This amazing experience attracts upwards of 20,000 participants and another 20,000 spectators.
This would not, I don't think, be allowed in the United States just because of the fire hazard. I don't know, maybe you could get away with it in certain parts of the US, but I feel like if they tried to do this in New York City, for instance, there would just be no way that the authorities would allow this to happen. You would have to use like electric or battery powered lights. They would not let you carry open flames, I don't think, through the streets of New York. So this is crazy to me. Not in a bad way. It's really cool. It's really cool. It's just so different. Again, this is continuing like the UK tradition of a lot of fire on Christmas and New Year's. I'm not aware of any traditions here in the United States that involves like open flames and fire, really. I mean, we might have a fire burning in the fireplace. That's about it.
And then there's the midnight fireworks show. If you think watching a ball of strobe lights drop in Times Square is pretty awesome, why don't you try this?
I don't think so. I always thought that was kind of a dumb tradition. Now, we do a lot of fireworks shows here in the US, so that's the closest thing we get to actual fire, I guess, here.
Auld Lang Syne. Perhaps the most famous and heartwarming Hogmanay tradition is the singing of Auld Lang Syne. This timeless song was originally a poem written by Robert Burns, based on a few lines of a traditional tune he heard sung by an old villager he knew. As the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve, the singing begins. Singers form a circle, cross their arms, and hold hands. Now, Auld Lang Syne is more than just a quaint ditty. It reminds us that as time passes, only true friendship and empathy for our fellow man endures. That's what makes life worth living, whatever may come. First footing. Immediately after midnight,
I actually didn't know that Auld Lang Syne was Scottish in origin, so that was cool to learn.
Practice of first footing can begin. Another ancient custom, first footing involves being the first person to cross the threshold of a friend or a neighbor's home. It's important because the first foot sets the luck of the household for the coming year. One old version of the custom involves the man leaving the house by the back door just before midnight on New Year's Eve. Then he runs around to the front of the house and at the stroke of midnight knocks on the front door. By doing this, he represents the old luck leaving and the new luck coming in. Symbolic gifts such as salt, coal, shortbread, whiskey, and black bun fruitcake are presented to the hosts. Each gift represents a different kind of good luck. In return, the householder offers gifts of food and drink to the first footer and his friends. Nowadays, first footing celebrations can go on well into the dawn hours.
Really? So you guys still do this over in
Hogmanay
Scotland?
is officially a 3-day holiday. The parties and the visiting just kind of roll on and on and on. It's really a great time to reconnect with the people who really matter to you. Saining. Now we come to the final major custom of Hogmanay, saining. This word means protecting or blessing in the Scots dialect. It's an ancient custom that comes from the Highlands. Early on New Year's Day, householders will drink a cup of magic water. What's magic about it? Well, it's basically water that's been drawn from what's called a dead and living ford. That is to say, a river ford that is routinely crossed by both the living and the dead. This usually means a stream crossing on the way to a churchyard. After you drink some of the water, the rest is sprinkled around each room of the house, on the beds, and even on all the people who live there. If you happen to have farm animals, you're going to sprinkle them too, because they deserve a blessing too, right? After the sprinkling, the house is sealed up tight, and juniper branches are set on fire. The lady of the house then carries them through each room, letting the smoke fumigate the entire building. You know you've done a good job when everyone is sneezing and coughing like crazy. Then all the doors and windows are flung wide open to let in the cold, fresh air of the new year. The lady of the house then offers a restorative from the whiskey bottle, and everyone sits down to a very pleasant New Year's breakfast. Clearly, Hogmanay is a complex and rich holiday. It captures in one celebration so much of what it is to be Scottish. So we hope you'll consider embracing some of these traditions this year. Don the kilt, pour a dram for yourself, relish the pure joy of the Celtic soul in the dark of winter. From all of us at USA Kilts, happy Hogmanay.
Alright, we're gonna take a look at Burns Night next, but I have to say, that last little bit where you guys basically smoked the house, I used to live in California and we would have wildfires out there, and the smoke from that would kind of seep into the house a little bit. We even had a fire that was like right where we lived, and we had to be evacuated, and when we came back, there was just like smoke damage and ash all over the place inside. So does the house not just smell like smoke for days or weeks afterwards after you do that? Or is there not enough smoke that happens to make it like really seep into everything? I'd also be interested to know how much of this is actually stuff that you guys do nowadays. Because, you know, it seems like as time goes on and things become more modern, a lot of these older traditions seem to die out a little bit. So I'd be interested to know how much of this is actually still actively practiced in Scotland by most people. Maybe all of it is, and if that's true, this is extremely different from what we do here in the United States. We just don't have anything like this here. Literally all we do here in the United States is people have like parties and they put on stupid hats and throw confetti around, have some wine or champagne. When the clock strikes midnight, they like do a traditional kiss or whatever. Fireworks go off. If you're in New York City, you're watching the ball drop. And that's literally all we do for New Year's. It's just like a party basically. Or if you're like me, you just go to bed at the normal time, then you're woken up a little bit by the fireworks at midnight, you go back to sleep, and then New Year's Day ends up being just a day like anything else. Alright, so we're going to turn our attention now to Burns Night. And again, there weren't any like really good official videos on this. So basically, there were some videos of like the Burns dinner and kind of what happens in that. So we're gonna watch one of those videos that actually takes place in Scotland, and we're gonna get an idea for kind of what Burns Night is like. Or at least I'm gonna get an idea. A lot of you guys are probably already familiar with this, so.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. Certainly a number of us that know this gentleman and how good he is at doing this. This is the moment where we all need to stand ready for the addressing of the Haggis.
Now, is that actually wrapped in a sheep's stomach? I heard that you guys don't really wrap it in sheep's stomach anymore.
Sadly play, Robert Burns is long away. But in the glens, and in the schools, and in the tunes, his words will aye be lang around. He was a prince of poetry, and a poor farmer too, and his words still shine like the morning dew. He wrote Old Lang Syne. Love is like a red, red rose, Mary of her girl,
So he's
and
reading the
lots
Robert
of
Burns
other
poem right
bonny
now, right?
prose. So as you sit there to dine and your friends to meet, I'll give you an address to the brews that you eat. Ode to the Haggis by Robert Burns.
Yeah.
Fair
Ode to Haggis.
fire on his sonsy face, great chieftain.
Oh, he
of
wasn't
the
doing it yet.
Boon
He was
race.
just talking about it.
Hogmanay at your place, pinch, tripe or term. Wheel
can't-
of your worthy o'er grace, as long as my arm. The groaning trencher there you fill, your herd is like a distant hill. Your pain would help to mend them all in time of need, whilst through your pores the dews distill like amber bead. His knife, see rustic
Oh,
labour deck,
okay.
and cut ye up with ready slicked, trenching your gushing on till's brick like on a ditch. And
Wasn't expecting
what a
this part of it.
glorious sight! You're warm, you're reeking, and you're rich. Then, horn for horn, they'll setch and sigh, deal deep hindmost on the drive, till other wheels swallowed kites believer bent like drums, that all good men mislike to leave be thanked hums. Is that there Irish French ragam? Or is that all I owe that would
This guy's doing a very, very dramatic reading of this poem. Or reciting of it.
Perfect scholar, look down with such a sneering, scornful view on such a dinner. Ha! Bare selves, see them out of the trash, as feckless as a weather drash. The spindly shanks a good whiplash in
I
these
wonder how much he rehearsed
through
this.
bloody fray or field to dash. Oh, how unfit! But mark this rustic. Hey, hey!
It's like everybody around is enjoying it.
He's Haggis fed.
I have a very hard time understanding the
and the legs and the arms and the heads will stand like ducks.
Scottish accent, so I don't understand what he's saying for the most part.
And dish us out your bills of fare. All Scotland wants no skinking wear. It jouts and luggies. But if you wish to hear a fervent prayer, ye heard the Haggis! Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
That was not what I was expecting. That was a really, really cool look at Burns Night though. I'm so glad it took place in Scotland so I could see like the authentic way of doing it. I'm sorry, I could not understand most of what he said. I caught a word here or there. I loved how dramatic he got with the reciting of the Robert Burns poem. I was not expecting him to pull out that knife and basically stab the haggis, but you know what? Brought a lot to the poem. But yeah, guys, the Scottish New Year is completely different from what we do here in the US. It looks like a very unique New Year's tradition. I really, really loved this look at Hogmanay and Burns Night, and really overall with this entire Christmas and New Year's season, I've learned just how much the winter solstice plays a hand in traditions around the world. Going into this, I did know that the winter solstice did trigger a lot of traditions, including Christmas, but I don't think I really understood the extent of the celebrations revolving around the winter solstice that there were. I've got a completely new appreciation for Christmas and New Year's around the world, and we've barely scratched the surface. So now that the new year is here, we're gonna wrap up all of these holiday videos, but I really appreciate you guys coming along for the ride and helping me learn more about this. If you guys are from Scotland in particular, or just from the UK where you know more about this than I do, if you can't answer any of my questions in the comments below, or if you'd like to add anything to the discussion, that would be great. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Roger and I would like to wish you guys a happy new year. Stay tuned for more, and we will see you next time.